Good morning, good afternoon to all those who are joining us at our Straight Talk here. My name is Karen Wills. I'm SVP of Marketing here at Strategikon. I'd like to welcome all of you who have decided to join us here this morning. And I'm just going to do a couple of housekeeping items and then toss it over to our panelists, who I'm sure you would rather hear more than me. So first of all, if you're going to OCT West Coast or to Scope, please feel free to look us up. We will be at both. Stop by and say hello. If you have any questions during this webinar, there should be a questions tab in your control panel. So please put your questions in there. I will be monitoring them throughout the webinar so that I will be providing them to our panelists. So welcome to our Straight Talk, our first one of 2024. We're very excited about this. Just so you know, Straight Talk is our series of robust conversations with industry leaders and experts on different topics and that are relevant to all, particularly in the outsourcing realm. So let me start with introducing our two speakers. First, from Strategikon, we have Sean Melville, our Vice President of Business Development. And Sean has more than 15 years of sales experience, primarily in the eClinical space. Over the years, he's worked to develop numerous strategic relationships with biopharm and CRO clients, and is dedicated to creating similar collaborative partnerships at Strategikon. So prior to joining us, Sean held business development positions at AG MedNet, a specialized clinical trial collaboration platform, and with Drug Dev. So welcome, Sean. Thank you for doing this. And for those of you that are not familiar with Strategikon, we support sponsors and CROs through our Clinical Maestro platform to drive efficiencies in clinical business operations, from study budgeting and planning through sourcing, through contract and vendor management. And that's all the commercial that you're going to get today, guys, so don't panic. And then today, we are extremely lucky to be joined by Nick Muir, who is a partner at LifeSci Consulting. Nick leads LifeSci's global operations consulting business and has previously led similar operations and procurement advisory businesses for Deloitte. He spent his career in life sciences working with a wide range of organizations across the sector on their most complex operational and cost challenges. This has included significant efforts to transform and digitize the procurement and outsourcing of core R&D activities. And just briefly on LifeSci Consulting, it's a boutique advisory firm that specializes in strategy, M&A, partnering, commercial excellence, and operational excellence. They have 10 locations across the US, UK, Europe, and Israel. And they say that differentiation is their people. And from knowing Nick, I can say that I believe that's absolutely true. They have more than 50 PhDs and MDs, plus deep industry and consulting expertise that enables the team to operate across all therapeutic areas and deliver real results rolled up, for the support of their clients. So with that, I'm done with my part. I will pass it over to you, Sean, to kick it off with you and Nick.
Great, thank you, Karen. And Nick, just to mimic what Karen said, thank you for joining me today for today's discussion. Both on a personal and professional level, as we turn calendars in January, it's often a time for reflection, reassessment of the prior year, as well as looking ahead to the promise of the new year. And from an industry perspective, we're always looking at how we can improve processes, how we can increase efficiency, be more cost conscious, and just overall more productive. And sourcing and procurement groups are no exception to that effort. So that being said, I'd like you to dust off maybe your crystal ball for 2024 and take a look at what do you think are going to be the biggest trends influencing clinical outsourcing in the industry. And this could be trends that maybe started in past years and are just going to be accelerated, or maybe some new trends that we haven't even really contemplated or thought of at all leading into the new year.
Of course. Well, firstly, thank you for the very kind and generous welcome, and a pleasure to be here, and welcome to all of those listening in as well, all around the world this afternoon. I guess from my perspective, Sean, I recognize that our audience will be fairly well versed in a number of the challenges facing the industry, and the biggest bit of macro context, I guess, that we can tackle head on is the decreasing return on investment from R&D, which, after a slight uplift during the pandemic, continues to be a challenge for all organizations as peak sales reduce, the therapy areas and the medical challenges that we're solving for getting more targeted, and the cost of carrying out the R&D work getting greater and greater. And alongside that, there are all the problems that we deal with in the outsourcing world: trial complexity, patient recruitment challenges, further and further focus on decentralized trials, thinking about the application of agile to studies as we move towards more, even more personalized medicine, and also just increasing cycle times overall for some of the trials that we're trying to work through. So I don't think none of those are new. As I say, everybody on the call will be acutely aware of all of those challenges and that macro context. I think they're going to continue to be a factor. That's without even touching on any of the broader macroeconomic challenges, be they inflationary, be they supply chain related, or be they geopolitical, that we're going to be dealing with over the next 12 months for certain. We've also got a huge amount of, let's call it democratic or political activity going on with changes of governments around the world, which are going to have an impact on health and life science policies for a number of major geographies. I think if we dive into the outsourcing realm just quickly, I think there's two things that we've been seeing, one on the demand side and one on the supply side, which are going to continue to shape the outsourcing world. On the demand side, the nature of those buying outsourced services has shifted materially over the last decade. The top 15 pharmas now only represent something like 20% of the outsourcing activity, which means many of those on the call today, the smaller guys, the biotechs, now make up 80% of that outsourcing activity in the market, and they've got different needs, and their spend is growing much faster, double, around something like 8 or 10% than big pharma. So CROs are becoming more and more focused on biotechs. There's more and more biotechs out there. It's a different market to serve. They've got different requirements, and that's going to shape the nature of the market. And on the supplier side, as everyone's aware of, we're seeing a huge amount of M&A, a lot of consolidation of the industry. The top 10 suppliers are now 60% of the market. And at the same time as that consolidation's happened, there's also been a diversification of the services that are offering. So there's less and less choice, but a far wider array of services that are available from some of those one-stop shops. It means the smaller players are getting nudged into ever narrower niches, which reinforces the broad lack of competition. So, I studied economics, so I think at least 3 out of the 4 criteria for being an oligopolistic market are satisfied when we look at the CRO marketplace. And it's perhaps unsurprising that while pharma CAGR has been something like 2.5% over the last 10 years, CROs are growing at something like 9 or 10%. So that lack of competition, that consolidation, that M&A activity, strong performance on the supply side, more challenging environment on the demand side.
Well, it's I always look and thanks. It's there are a number of challenges from an industry perspective, but I always take the view that where there are challenges, opportunities can flourish. So with that said, in terms of the numerous challenges you touched upon, what opportunities do you see coming out of those challenges from an outsourcing and procurement perspective?
I think what I certainly from having seen those who've signed up for the webinar today, I think we've got to acknowledge we've got 2 sets of listeners out there today. We've got our biotech listeners and our big pharma listeners, and I think first and foremost we need to acknowledge that the challenges and the opportunities for each of those players is different. The scale's different, maturity levels are different, the requirements are different. And I was reading some data the other day.
Nick, I think there's a problem with your sound. Was having a hard, you dropped off about halfway through. Still having a problem hearing.
Hey, Sean, while Nick reviews his sound, why don't we run the first poll?
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I think, Nick was already talking about the challenges facing the outsourcing and procurement, and really interested in understanding what the audience thinks of the topic. From a poll perspective, thanks, Karen. What do you see for the biggest outsourcing and procurement challenge in 2024? 1, complex stakeholder negotiations. 2, lack of capability and resources. 3, lack of technology to assist. 4, going over budgets. Or 5, increasing costs. So again, just interested to see what the audience feels are sort of the biggest challenges associated in outsourcing and procurement in 2024. So Nick, I don't know if your sound is back up, if you want to try and talk and see if we can hear you. So looking to see, Karen, when your results start coming in, if you can, once you've got a robust number of responses, I'm fascinated to see if the audience aligns with some of the things that Nick had mentioned as part of his discussion on challenges.
Yeah, we actually have a good number have already come in. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds.
Sure.
For those of you that haven't voted, last 10 seconds to get it in. Please, we'll do this.
Is that any better, Sean?
It is a bit better, Nick. I can hear you now. That's great.
Okay. All right, so I'm not entirely sure. When I'm here in the middle of one of the great cities of the Western world and seemingly unable to hold down a connection, so apologies.
No worries.
Not a problem. All right, I'm going to close the poll now, gentlemen, and now I'm going to share. I'll share the results.
Great, thanks.
You should be able to see them.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Nick. From my standpoint, I'm somewhat surprised that there's a relatively level playing field in terms of an equal percentage spread out across a number of different challenges. I would have thought that perhaps 1 or maybe 2 would have been more higher than the others. But you know, just what are you thinking? What's your thoughts on what you're seeing from the group?
It's interesting. I was I don't know where I got cut off there, but I was about to turn my thinking to sort of biotech side of things, where I do know that lack of capability, capacity, and resource is a really big challenge in this space. So I think that's interesting to see. May reflect the audience that we've got on the call today, but yeah, pretty even spread across those 5 hot topics there for sure.
Yeah, and so you were talking about before lost your connection there in terms of the biotech. Maybe you want to just talk a little bit again about what you were referring to on the biotech side.
I think, you're talking about opportunities. I was saying for big pharma, I think the opportunity to disaggregate some of those earlier full service models, which, as I said, many are looking at best of breed solutions. There's the capability and the capacity often within those clinical operations and clinical outsourcing teams to do that. I think that creates a different set of skills and considerations that are required. It becomes, what's your internal operating model a lot more? How do you hold together a disaggregated value chain like that? And I think there's a big opportunity for technology to be integrated into an outsourced world where you're managing a more disparate number of vendors across, a clinical trial program or a series of clinical trial programs and studies that might be global and might span a number of different therapeutic areas. I think to the poll we've just seen, on the biotech side of things, we know the teams are small. We know often that it's chief scientific officers, chiefs of CFOs who are making some of those original outsourcing decisions. And I think the opportunity is to outsource the identification and the management of some of those best of breed options to the CRO as more of a sort of platform integrator. One of the big advantages for the smaller players of the CROs is they've often got much better global reach for running global studies. They've got brand recognition when it comes to sites. They're able to secure the sites and the patients that are required to get to the right trial outcomes. And so there continues to be an opportunity if the CROs are up for providing a really solid support model for those biotechs. we have to recognize there's a larger number of them, more diverse. It's a harder market to serve, and it's all therefore got a different set of economics associated with it than what some of the big pharma models that we're used to in the past. I think with all of that said, Sean, just to maybe conclude on opportunities, I think there's universals regardless of size. And if we go back to the nature of the level of competition in this outsourced marketplace, the key question for me is how do you create value and innovation in a market that isn't necessarily set up from the outset to deliver that to you, whether you're large or small. You know, we always see the power dynamic leans towards the supplier, not with the sponsor, and the opportunities for critical development investment to be not wasted, but deployed inefficiently are pretty high. And so, you know, there's the need to think about outsourcing strategies to deliver good, solid procurement and to have the right process and systems backing that up, as you and I talk about all the time, are critical.
Yeah, I'd like to dive into that a little bit more, the idea of value or loss of value as it pertains to poor outsourcing strategies, and then how do you go about sort of shifting the dynamic and looking to employ a different approach regarding strategy. So maybe you could talk a little bit more and dive a little bit deeper into the sort of correlation between loss of value with regard to poor outsourcing strategies, and then how can you go about, or what do you see happening in terms of implementing a different approach from a strategic standpoint? I think we're losing your voice again, Nick. Try something now.
Can you?
Yep, can you hear you now? Go ahead.
Okay. So I think you talk about value. I think, you know, always the value in good outsourcing activity is a patient outcome. So the quality of the result from the outsourcing and the speed which we're able to execute all outsourcing life.
Losing you again. Right now.
Is that any better?
That is much better now.
Okay, all right. I'm not actually doing anything. I think that's a connection that seems to be fading in and out. So, look, question was how much value gets lost here? The easy answer is a lot. I think last estimate I saw, there's something like $50 billion a year that gets spent by biotech and pharma companies on outsourcing. I think it's pretty safe to say, even based on some of the evidence I've seen in the work that I'm doing, that there's tens of millions of dollars every year that get lost. And I think the point that I want to leave, and I know many of the procurement professionals on the phone will know, is that value doesn't necessarily get lost the moment you do the deal and choose the supplier. That value gets lost over time in the contract. And good deals don't get managed well. Supplier behaviors change, and it's all about what happens subsequently. So, you know, good deals become bad deals, and bad deals become even worse without the right level of management. So, you know, I think what you do post-contract has always been important, no matter what you're procuring. I think in this space, given the complexity of it, that's really, really important. And that's therefore all about transparency. It's about building the right partnerships, but it's also a lot to do with divorcing the day-to-day operational running of your outsourcing activity, which is typically clinical operations folks or clinical folks in-house with the teams on the study side with your partner, and the procurement activity, which is all about the commerciality that needs to be inserted into discussions. Are we getting what we want to get, and are we paying what we should be paying? And I think you can have a great partnership with commerciality in it. You don't have to shy away from having the difficult conversations about value in order to protect the quality of the partnership and the collaboration. I think that part of this has always been important for me. And, you know, one of the things we spend a lot of time talking to clients about is don't be shy. Create different roles and responsibilities in terms of how those conversations are had, but do not be shy about talking about money when it comes to these things. Yes, the study's important. Yes, the quality of the output's important. Yes, having the A team and the pace and all of those things that are critically important from an operational perspective, but don't shy away from having the right conversation around making sure that your hard your capital that you're putting into your R&D is being appropriately allocated, and that the CRO is custodian of that in many cases, taking the best possible care of that capital.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. You sort of touched upon some of the, I guess, best practices that you look to deploy as part of optimizing procurement and outsourcing. I'm assuming you get a lot of push. There's a lot of pushback that comes as a result of trying to shift. I mean, we talk. The industry is great at talking about the need to move off of the status quo, the need to be innovative, the need to be disruptive. But when the the rubber meets the road, so to speak, in terms of trying to actually move forward with that, in terms of providing new thoughts and maybe offering technology as an option internally within the organizations, you get pushback. And I'm just wondering, A, do you see that as a real primary challenge, the whole change management approach? And then B, if you do, what do you look to do in terms of trying to address that pushback?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think there's always skepticism that if you start with a solution, there's always going to be a reason why not that solution. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the last 10 years or so when tackling these sorts of exercises, everybody who's involved in the process of outsourcing or of managing and facilitating clinical trials, be that clinical operations, be that procurement, be that contracting, be that outsourcing management, be that the supplier teams and the study teams, everybody's got issues and challenges. And so where we always start is what are everyone's problems, what are everyone's beefs with how this works today? Too slow, too many iterations, too many people's involved, lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities, and getting those out on the table. And once we've had that discussion and people have almost had that cathartic moment of thinking about the way things work, we then start to drive collaborative working with suppliers as well around how could things work better in the future. And there are always some quid pro quos in that. So for example, CROs greatly value visibility over what's going to be coming down the pipe over a 12-18-month period. So giving your outsourced partners transparency and visibility over what you want to do over an extended period enables them to plan better, assign resources better, manage their economics considerably more sensibly. They can then take that as a win, and then they can start to respond to some of the concerns that you might have on your side. So I think starting with a really good view of underpinning that collaboration with a joint understanding of how the process is going to work end to end. How does the operating model work end to end? What are the different roles that people can play around that? That gets things set up the right way in the first place. And then I think the other thing that we really like to do is enable those who are trying to do the work to be as close as possible to each other, to talk and to collaborate. So internal study team to project team on the CRO side, let's get all the barriers to them collaborating and communicating around translating the protocol into the study that we possibly can. Let's take the procurement out of that discussion, but make sure it happens in and around the sidelines and separate that out, and then drive the commercial value through those procurement discussions.
So you touched upon efficiency, you touched upon transparency, you talked about internal collaboration, breaking down barriers so there's better enhanced communication. How does technology fit into that in terms of an effort to try to achieve those goals that mentioned are part of the strategic shift when you're talking to folks in outsourcing and procurement?
So I mean, I think technology drives two things for me from perspective. It creates a process backbone, what is a relatively complex service that's being handled by multiple actors in a challenging environment, right? So it's
Losing you again, Nick. Apologies, everyone. Just talking about technology, we're facing a bit of a challenge here in terms of Nick being able to be heard. Try now, Nick. Nope. I'll just fill in maybe a little bit about what I think my thoughts are regarding how technology comes into play. I think they go hand in hand with the effort to strategically offer alternatives within outsourcing and procurement. The whole concept of change management is a hard pill sometimes to swallow for organizations for a variety of different reasons. But if you can layer the change management approach from a personnel and perspective with technology to demonstrate how they both in combination with one another are going to offer efficiencies and that level of transparency, you have a better chance of getting internal adoption for a shift from the status quo to an approach that is hopefully going to be much more efficient. Can you hear, Nick?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
And now.
Okay, well, it's only taken someone finding me a whole nother laptop to make that work. Look, you're as well placed, if not better placed than I am, Sean, to talk about the technology side of things, particularly given your background and experience. But I think the other thing I was going to touch on is technology gives you transparency, and it gives you the richness of all of that data that supports these solutions. Certainly where we've used Clinical Maestro, your solution in the past, that ability to create transparency and that frictionless internals in the process speeds things up, enables people to iterate very quickly to along. And certainly where we've applied technology in the past, we've been able to reduce cycle times, as I say, create transparency, and also create an opportunity for continuous improvement, because you get all that data, you're able to harvest it, you're able to look, you're able to adjust your requirements, feeds back to that forward visibility for the suppliers, and also enables procurement category teams to adjust their category strategies based on what they're seeing from the business and from the study teams as they engage with the suppliers through some of those sourcing tools.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer, and you can never have enough data and information to make educated decisions. And so, with regard to, technology and being able to take information from disparate sources and centralize it and have, as you said, visibility and transparency in terms of the data, and then to be able to utilize it and leverage it for better decision making, which is going to drive efficiencies, which is going to increase further along the level of transparency. But I think, again, there is a natural synergy between technology and thinking on strategically how organizations can be better aligned internally and how they can create better processes, better management. I think that they obviously just work naturally hand in hand. I'd like to get some thoughts on the audience in terms of their thinking regarding technology. I know we have another poll in terms of how technology and implementing technology within business processes. So thanks, Karen. Just really want to get the audience thought in terms of, their utilization of technology into their business processes. So question is, have you or will you implement technology into your business processes? Planning to do so in a relatively short period of time, next 1 to 6 months. Planning to do so, but a little bit of a longer time frame, 7 to 12 months. Not sure where to start. Still, the next one is not convinced of the value. And finally, yes, we've already utilized technology and have it installed and used within our organization. So again, interested to learn what the consensus is from the attendees. I have my thoughts in terms of what my thinking is in terms of the responses, but again, want to see what the audience has to say.
So Sean, while we're waiting for the audience to vote, and they're coming in right now, let me throw out this question to you and Nick. So we had a question come in that says, what is the impact of Inflation Reduction Act, and what changes need to be made to the Inflation Reduction Act to ensure that there continues to be innovation? So if you guys want to comment on that.
Yeah, Nick, do you want to take that?
We've actually, some of my colleagues have written a fantastic position paper on this. US government policy, not necessarily an area of expertise, but I'd certainly be happy to circulate that thinking after the call, if that would be helpful to those who've asked that question. We've got similar changes happening to the pricing that are going through consultation as well too, which I know is going to have a material impact on the cost profile for many foreign pharma companies who are on as well too. So there's a lot of pricing questions aren't just commercial ones, they impact the overall cost structure and the structure of the business. And that's why, whether we're talking about R&D cost or whether we're talking about back office cost, getting the business as lean and mean as possible in order to be able to guard against some of that volatility, guard against some of the uncertainty that's coming from the front end of the business is really, really important, and certainly what I spend my time on. But as I say, I don't really want to wade into a sort of US policy to write my team to back me up on it. So happy to circulate an opinion afterwards. Sean, not sure your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it was this question, if it was a year ago in terms of where inflation stood in terms of its importance, I think it was obviously at that time a real consideration and factor in a variety of different ways. I think it's leveled off a bit, and I think it may be sort of maybe not in the rearview mirror, but less of a concern. I know from my discussions in terms of our system and how inflation is an important factor from a budget planning perspective. We try to incorporate it as much as we can as a factor into the overriding planning of budgets. But I think inflation as an idea is something that sort of was paramount about a year or so ago, but I think it's becoming less and less over the course of say the next 6 months or so.
Okay, so thank you for answering that, gentlemen. We're going to just give it another 10 seconds. We've actually left it open quite a while for, so if anybody has any last minute votes they want to put in, I'm going to close it. And oh, there we go. We're getting a couple more coming in. This is your last chance. All right, here we go. We're going to close the poll, and we're going to share the results here.
I don't know about you, Nick. I'm pleased that organizations have come to the conclusion already that having technology be implemented in their business process, 50% is I think fantastic. I think it obviously is probably and should grow over the course of time, but it's still encouraging that half of the individuals within organizations have some level of technology being utilized for business processes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a set of questions or responses anyway that if we had have looked at that 4, 5, 6 years ago would have been a very different picture. I think one of the things that 50% of respondents there is what is the go forward plan to continue to both that tech scratch and maintained, keep the content, the quality of variance for the user as expected, as business strategy, just category strategy change, as science change, all that sort of things. There's obviously an effort associated with that, keeping with some of the new technologies which have become all in which business users to expect as these too. So I think it's fantastic because it means we're creating the right foundation for executing the work. I think the work's never done, and I think it's what's that continuous improvement journey look like. And I hate to be the first person to drop the sort of artificial intelligence, machine learning buzzword on here, but we are seeing increased opportunities for the application in the right way of some of as well too, over and above some of the platforms that we might have traditionally seen.
Yeah, I wanted to while I was pleased with seeing that 50% already implemented technology, the one thing that did also jump out at me was the one right above it, 17% don't see value. And I think that is something that from an industry perspective needs to really be addressed, and that's a combination, again, getting back to the marriage of technology and change management strategic discussions that take place, because obviously that's a mindset that needs to be addressed, and there needs to be an effort to demonstrate where the value can be found by utilizing technology within organizations.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So you talked about value before in terms of loss of value within the outsourcing and procurement group. Flip side to that is going about mitigating risk. And again, I'd like you to sort of talk about that in the combination of how both from a strategic standpoint, your efforts, but then also how technology can be utilized to mitigate risk. Sound again.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the most basic premises of it can't be. You got me back?
Yep, got you back.
You know, one of the most sort of outsourcing is all about shifting the risk profile, right? I think that's what we're talking about here. As you go about outsourcing activities, your risk profiles change. You're hopefully buying in expertise, capacity, and reach, and you're hopefully removing delivery risk from your R&D activities. That's the name of the game. I'm going out to find those whose core study activity have got vendors and the right networks, they've got the right global reach, they've got the right sites, all of that sort of thing. That de-risks, that changes the risk they're planning as the outsourcer or sponsor. So you're moving from being an executor and managing the execution risk to being a receiver of outcome. And you need to make sure that you get the outcomes that you're after, right, from the activity that you're outsourcing. So, you know, are you getting what you're paying for? Are the monies that you're paying up front in advance of many activities being dispensed the way that they should be and appropriately and in a compliant way? Are you going to get your deliverables? Will they meet your requirements? Will they be on that you require? All of those sorts of things, as well as have you got the right retained operating model to work appropriately with your outsourcing provider? We see duplicate activities all the time because nobody's thought about where the handshake is between internal teams and external teams, and there's lost value in that straight away where you've got people marking people's homework. Right? It all comes back for me, design the outsourcing solution correctly, put the right provider in place with the right relationship and the right creation, and trust but verify. And I think, you know, creating a relationship that's underpinned by transparency and enables all parties to operate effectively as they possibly can to achieve the outcomes key. And obviously, you know, we're having a bit of a technology theme conversation here today. As I mentioned earlier, that enables to translate the structure of the arrangements that you put in place into very clear, structured ways where data is able to be captured, operation is able to take place in a way that is recorded, where data is gathered, and that data is able to be analyzed and reflected upon, enables you to manage all manner of things, be it pass-through expenses, be it information sharing, be it pricing, all sorts of things. And I think that's where tech is key. Good procurement support is key through all of that to keep managing that commercial side of things, and getting it all set up right hopefully makes execution a lot smoother. So I think outsourcing is about risk transfer. It's the name of the game for you as the person transferring that risk. You're going to be much more focused on the outcomes, much more trust but verify than you would be if you were executing these activities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the areas that I see from a mitigation risk perspective, from where technology is sort of the whole vendor management perspective. It's an unwieldy challenge for large pharma companies to have a real grasp as to who the vendors are, what are they qualified for, when are key events coming up, and they run the risk if they don't have a real concise and centralized approach and having tech to support that, of